Professor Rilo diagnosed the England patient as having a very specific disorder, fear of failure.
Down here, you have the fear of failure. That is a very, very important negative factor. Fear of failure. Afraid of doing mistakes. Too much fear of failure.
Fear of failure is a crippling form of anxiety, a negative reaction to the huge burden of expectation. Players become inhibited, take fewer risks, and consequently underachieve.
Fear of failure, it's a big problem in football. They are afraid doing mistakes, afraid not being good enough, and so on. And I think the job as a manager, you have to make them secure, tell them that you don't need to be afraid, just go out. I'm behind you, I take the responsibility and things like that.
According to Eriksson and Rilo, fear of failure is more than just a mental problem. It directly affects physical performance on the pitch. It causes a phenomenon sports psychologists call choking. One of the most infamous examples of choking was the Euro '96 semi-final. The match against Germany came down to penalties. As the last England penalty taker, Gareth Southgate faced extreme pressure. If he missed, England would lose. Gareth Southgate choked. He hadn't even kicked the ball cleanly. And it was all because of what happened inside his brain. At the University of Lancashire, Dr. Rod Corban is investigating precisely why Gareth Southgate choked, by looking at how mental pressure can inhibit a player's physical skills.
Is it the case that when people are anxious, their movements do become very stiff and jerky, that somehow something about the control of the movement changes? And that's one of the reasons I decided to pursue this line of investigation.
In Corban's experiment, reflective markers are placed over the subject's body. These relay the relative position of his limbs to a computer for processing.
On my mark, 3, 2, 1, go.
The data is used to calculate the smoothness of his movements.
What we've been doing in the laboratory is training people up on a variety of tasks, and in particular we've looked at a footballer. We asked them to kick the ball under normal conditions and collected information on their kinematics or their movements. We've then placed them under some sort of stress and observed changes in their kinematics and compared them to their kinematics or their movements under these normal conditions.
For the anxiety phase of the experiment, the player was simply told his performance would be rated by an expert panel. Corban wanted to find out if the player's movements would become less expert under pressure. And sure enough, he couldn't even hit the goal.
What we've found thus far is that what seems to happen is that under anxiety conditions, their behaviour or their kinematics or their movements become less variable, and that is, their movements are not as fluid, more stiff or rigid, and also that their movements resemble those observed when they were learning the task.
Anxiety makes a footballer's movements less flowing, and it's all down to how their brain works.
When we learn a task, a particular part of the brain seems to be more involved in the control of the action. And as we become more expert at the task, a different part of the brain becomes more active in the control of that movement.
When learning a new skill, a player has to think hard about what they're doing, and their movements are controlled by a conscious thinking area of the brain called the ventral stream. But